Hey there, everybody. Welcome to the next Walkabout Talkabout. Today, I'm Lucas Martell, creator of Walkabout Mini Golf. And today I'm here with Michael Wentworth-Bell of Espire, one of the awesome stealth games. I was about to say stealth shooter, but it's not really even a shooter. But I'll take my first stroke here and then let Mike introduce himself, talk about his studio and everything. You see, this is the great thing about doing talkabouts. I actually don't get a chance to play a lot of the older courses, and it's always nice to embarrass myself on my own game. But yeah, tell us a little about you and the studio and what you guys are working on.
Sure. Thanks for having us on, Lucas. I really appreciate it. Don't have to worry about embarrassing yourself. This being the last, this is the last 9 holes of this level, yeah? Because these are really hard.
Yeah. I don't know why I thought that this would be just like stylistically. I felt like, oh, this is kind of the closest thing we have to your game. So I was like, but then I realized only a little too late. Oh yeah, grip to putt is on. Sorry, we changed that earlier. So you got to hold the grip button to activate your putter.
For some reason, it's still red. Weird. I'll just
Oh, maybe I know because it wants me to go a second time because we messed up the turn order.
Oh,
I'll get it that time. There we go.
Nice job. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I'm the creative director of the company Digital Load Immersive Media. We've been around since about 2017 as a company, and to date we've released 2 Espire games. The inspiration's been kind of GoldenEye, Metal Gear Solid, and trying to reimagine what stealth mechanics feel like in VR.
What were some of the challenges and just sort of like VR is like, it is very much its own sort of like beast. I'm kind of curious, like even just like speed, like stealth, so many people are used to sort of like a certain speed involved in that. Whereas in VR, you just can't be moving that fast, both for comfort and just like physically, you can't be doing that. I'm kind of curious, how you had to change sort of like some of the standard sort of like tropes of the genre a little bit coming over to VR.
Yeah, there was a couple of big ones. I think the big one's patience. Like in a stealth game, you got to hide from the guard, or you're encouraged to. And in VR, that can get. It can get tedious in a stealth game, just in general. But in VR, it's could be particularly tedious. So just trying to find ways where you've got a bunch of gadgets or things like having to repair your unit. Is quite interactive for. To hopefully give interest to players. The second one was the comfort. We early on really wanted to have smooth locomotion, which is kind of really challenging for first-time VR players. We didn't want to try and make a game that had teleport. We had seen budget cuts and thought they just nailed it. The other stealth game that has portal teleporting. Even then, I think they've added smooth locomotion down the track because players just want it in a kind of shooter style game like that. So we developed a kind of try to do a comfort feature that would hopefully let people play with full freedom of movement without getting sim sickness. They were probably the 2 biggest challenges, I think.
And maybe you could talk a little bit more about that, because I know sort of like the scene. I guess I didn't quite catch what you had called it, the scene for basically the what you're talking about with the sort of like the telescoping of your peripherals in order to sort of keep you focused and avoid the sickness. What did you guys say that you had called it?
It was called the Control Theater. So we should have picked a more catchy name, but it was actually kind of the thing that it kind of got us green lit. So trying to push around a prototype to get funding in 2017. We were having a hard time, but it was the Control Theater itself. In a nutshell, the kind of concept of Espire is you're a drone operator of the future. And so you're standing in essentially a holodeck style room, and you are using your VR headset to control this Espire frame that might be thousands of miles away. And so the idea of the Control Theater was when you do any form of artificial movement where you're using a thumbstick, maybe you're falling off a cliff like this or coming down the stairs, but in the real world you're standing still, the view of Espire will shrink to a floating iPad in front of you, and in your peripheral vision you'll see the control theater that you're standing in the the real world sort of thing. So that was a way to try and like offer full freedom of movement and still maintain immersion. And it was successful at minimizing sim sickness.
I can totally see that. I mean, like, that's definitely one of the things I've noticed, like, especially, I noticed it most with squadrons, where just having the cockpit around you helped stabilize and just put something in the foreground that helped make it so that it felt like, even like the idea of sort of like planes of glass between you and the outside world, it helped dramatically. But yeah, just playing your game, I really noticed how much that how comfortable the movement was. I have to admit, I've also gotten to a point where I'm used to playing on such, broken builds, or like you're getting like 20 frames a second, that I kind of have the iron stomach a little bit anymore. So it's hard for me to, I can still find plenty of ways to make myself motion sick. It's always whenever the horizon tilts. Like, that's the number one thing to just make me sort of like insta not feel good. But
yeah, agreed. With everything you said, I think we probably didn't really succeed on the maintain immersion bit, because it's kind of a grey box, and so it does take you out of the experience a little bit. But we did try to add a bunch of features where, like, based off what you're staring at, it'll a few times a second it'll kind of like lerp the colors of the theater to match the general brightness. So if you're staring into like a light, and then if you turn your head and you're in the dark, the theater will kind of color match. That really helped. And I guess part of the fun was trying to get it to run on the Quest.
Oh yeah, totally. It's your turn, by the way. You won that last hole, so you have honors. But how was the Quest? Because did you guys start aiming for Quest, or did you start aiming for PC and then come over?
Heavily PC. We were hectically PC. We're a first-time dev team, and so I'd say pretty unoptimized on the PC. And then through the pitching process, we were trying to pitch through 2018, which was a dark year for VR, and so it got to a kind of point where it was only really going to be possible for us to get funding if we supported this up-and-coming Santa Cruz headset. And so we just said, yes, we'll do it. We didn't even know anything about it. And, kind of along the way, just realized, this will be harder than we thought. So it took, a few months, and ended up kind of having, I think, like a 13 or maybe 15% overhead to enable it, this control theater on the GPU, but we thought it's worth it.
The overhead is a big thing that for folks who aren't doing like mobile VR development or standalone VR development, a lot of it's usually like that transparent overdraw. Like, anytime you've got stuff that's sort of like rendering a different scene on top of it, it is a massive hit. But yeah, I'm also kind of curious, sort of like other things that you ran into kind of coming over to Quest beyond just optimization. Like, did that change much? Like, not having the cable, did that change sort of like how you were doing it, or at that point had you already sort of like developed enough that it didn't really have that big of an effect on the game design, I guess?
It had a pretty big effect on the game design, because we were originally developing when it was just the original Rift CV1, which was a headset that only supported really front-facing play. So if you turned around, it was difficult. And also we were supporting the PSVR one, which was similar. So our game design only really catered for that by rendering certain colors in the control theater, so that you kind of knew if you're facing the front versus the back, with a kind of a warning to turn around if you were 180. It was, I guess, just freedom a bit to be able to not have to worry so much about that on the other platforms.
Yeah,
but it was mostly I'd say a level design thing for us. Like, we'd already kind of gone a year and a half into a game that was designed for PC, and then moving to Quest, we had to make some pretty serious level design changes so that we could render it on the Quest, or even launch the levels on the Quest.
That makes a lot of sense. Something that you said earlier got me thinking, because one of the other things that's also very different about VR is that you're really locked into first person. There's been a couple of people who've done, like Moss is one of the few examples of a truly like third person perspective game. But I'm trying to actually think of a stealth title that is first person. From a design standpoint, does that also change? Of just sort of like, you're not able to see around corners to see where enemies have you actually, or you actually have to stick your head out. How much of an effect did that have on the game design?
Yeah, I think it's an awesome question, because we kind of spent a long time looking at games, and I couldn't initially think either. I think the big ones that we looked at, or the big one we looked at, was the Dishonored games. They were like first-person stealth that had, and also we considered like Deus Ex or Deus Ex to be, stealth as well. They really offer stealth, and so we were looking at how do they kind of have a visual information system so that players know where the enemies are coming from, or if an enemy's suspicion level is growing. And so that was really fun. It meant that we added a lot of tools. That we have a feature called Espire Vision, where you can see through see-through walls, like an X-ray effect. It's also got night vision kind of view mode in it, and so that helped a lot. And then standard kind of threat arrows from games like Titanfall, where they could appear because they're 3D. You can kind of tell, that person is behind and above me.
Yeah.
To try and help with the letting you know where the enemies were. And we also added hand cameras. So each of your hand had these cameras on them. You could put your hand around the corner to see if the enemies are around.
Oh, I don't think I actually got to. I don't think that because I played it a decent bit, but I don't know if I actually got to that upgrade. But that's pretty cool. Yeah, it's why I'm trying to picture how that would feel. But I suppose it's essentially like you're looking almost like at a monitor on your wrist almost when you're doing it, right?
Yeah, in the first game, it would appear, and you could take. I'm trying to use my other hand to demonstrate, but you could basically like pick the camera off and throw it, which was fun. But we realized in the first game no one really used it, and so in the second game we added it for our Cinder frame, and I think we found too no one really used it, but you could still reposition the camera, look around corners, and also attach it to weapons. So there are like fun uses for it, but I suppose we didn't really eke them out enough.
Oh yeah, sort of a design thing of like encouraging people to do that. I'd imagine too that's also something as complex as a stealth game requires a lot of just training in terms of just how to do it, because there's so many different ways you can gamify things. Oh, I hate this hole. I hate this hole. Let me take a moment to take this really seriously. Okay. Oh, this isn't the hard version. You can go a little fast and it won't kill you. But yeah, stealth is just a genre that there's just so many different things that you could do. You talked a little bit about some of those in terms of how you were sort of hinting at that. I'd imagine that the idea that you had was sort of like that you're controlling these robots, the frames as you call them, that gave you guys a lot of license to add in some of like the UI elements. I'm curious, if there were any other big sort of like game design things or systems that maybe kind of came up organically in the process of making the game that kind of maybe even changed the direction or just sort of like change your approach of how you're doing it with having all of that VR UI stuff to sort of help hint at what was going on for people.
The biggest one, I think, was we added cheats late in the development of Espire 1. We were inspired big time by GoldenEye, how it had cheats like Big Head Mode and really fun novelty stuff, or even some anti-cheats as well. And so one of them was like tiny Espire, where you were essentially 3 foot tall, or 90 centimeters tall. And testing that out, we thought this is really funny. The first level of the game was really hard to complete because you were so small, you couldn't reach some key stuff. And so we, for the sequel, decided to like double in on that and make frames that one was 6 foot and one was 3 foot, and we would scale the user's IPD so the world would feel small or large, just like what you all do when you kind of go into the God mode. Yeah. And that changed a lot of the game design, because we thought, oh cool, because now there's some stuff you get for free. Players' arms are too small; they can't throw things as far, or a player's tall enough to reach a ledge that's up high, and so we could kind of also differentiate what their abilities were too. So there's kind of a small frame, quite weak, has the ability to, with its Espire vision, to see through walls, and if it focuses on a enemy soldier, you can see their patrol path, and you can see an estimate of what their cone of vision is. And then the tall frame has got the hand cameras, to as well to sort of hopefully split up the mechanics a bit and the UI.
That's super cool. Yeah, taking advantage of that, and we found the same thing that those things that you can't do in real life, like making someone giant or small, or even some of those special abilities, or just anything that's sort of like that, just like little details of stuff that gives people a sort of like a different view of the world, is super fun. And if you build that in from the get-go, which sounds like with Espire 2, you guys knew that was something, that so you kind of designed everything to work from that. So maybe there's puzzles that, I guess it's not like you can't necessarily switch between any of them at any given time, if I remember right. It's sort of like certain modes you sort of like switch between them, so it's not like you're designing every puzzle to be completed in 2 different ways, right?
Yeah, I think we probably just scraped the surface in doing our post-mortem. We thought, we could have done so much more. In the single player campaign, by the time you get to the 3rd mission, you can switch between them if almost for the entire level, and there's certain pathways to give mostly goodies, like ammunition or weapons. And then in the co-op campaign, you can play as the one. You have to be either with the 2 players. You both have to choose 1 frame each, but there's some progression kind of blockers and stuff. But we thought, cool, that if we ever get to make an Espire 3, we can kind of take that on steroids.
Very cool. Well, I'm kind of curious, sort of like we've been talking a lot about sort of like, the stuff that you guys had done and sort of learned, but I'm kind of curious what you guys are working on next, or just sort of like what's kind of getting you excited in the VR space.
Yeah, I think we've been working on a roadmap for Espire 2 to deliver a bunch of new content and features, and along the last few months, one of the things that has really become an opportunity for us was to make a mixed reality game mode for Espire. And so we've kind of called it the Espire MR missions, and the kind of concept is really the world's first stealth game in your house. So we're using have a meta reality scene API, and as a player it's a big ask. You've got to kind of add your rooms and add your desks and cupboards and many items. At the moment it's quite manual. In the future hopefully it'll be an automatic step, but you can actually add probably 3 rooms of your house connected. And so we've tried to build a procedural game mode that'll kind of add enemies and add laser threats and basically add all the mechanics of our game, security cameras and sleeping kind of mechs, and then you've got to sneak your way through to complete some objectives. There's maybe you have to find a guard to put on a retinal scanner, which opens a hacking laptop that you can hack. And so it's been super fun. It's super challenging. Like, the team have been pulling their hair out to try and make it work. But it's been exciting.
That's super cool. I've only dabbled a little bit with that, because Walkabout started off as an AR thing. So I've dabbled a decent bit with that. I actually haven't got a chance to sink my teeth into all of the meta, their sort of like scene thing. But I know when it would have been a couple of years ago that I was really playing around with it a lot, and it's super cool, but incredibly technically challenging, just because you have to find a way to deliver a good game experience in any shaped space. But just the straight technical of getting it all to work, what's the biggest design challenge with something like that MR version?
I guess there's a challenge of not knowing what the player base or target audience, how they'll react with mixed reality, or what they will how they'll use the tech. And so
Yeah.
in that approach, trying to make a fun experience that starts small and maybe supports a 3 by 3 meter room, assuming you've got like a desk and a bed in it or something, and then can scale up to 2 or 3 rooms. I felt like we made a decision. We're not going to try and solve that one. We'll just make a series of levels that are for small, medium, and large environments, and then try and we sort of have like a room review step when you launch the mode, and it'll cut your entire level into zones, or your level, your space into a series of zones, and based off that, some of the content may be locked away if it's incompatible with your space. For example, like some players might not have right angle walls, and there's some levels that are assuming walls at corners, and so we thought we might try and do the classic game Perfect Dark. It had a one of my favorite games on the Nintendo 64 on the back of the box. It sort of showed if you had the Nintendo 64 expansion pack, this is how much is unlocked, 33%, and if you don't, 100%, if you don't have it, there's only 33% unlocked. So that's our current approach, that we're shipping it later this year to try and like unlock as much of the content as possible based off your room size, and then lock away the ones that just we think won't work.
Yeah, I mean it's super interesting, and it's very sort of like just sort of like that's the thing that everyone's trying to figure out. But even like as big of a shift as it was to go into VR and start to tackle some of those problems, MR there are a lot of new of new challenges and new unknowns, and like you said, you don't even quite know like what people are going to respond to, or what's felt like by the time like when we were working on Walkabout, so like had a good idea sort of like what was working, what wasn't. So there was some examples of some really, really great games out there, but there's almost nothing out there right now in terms of MR. So yeah, you're really sort of like out in the Wild West on the frontier, sort of like just figuring out what works and doesn't. That's super cool.
It's kind of been really exciting for first time in a few years, because it's like VR is always exciting and or just immersive media, and so this has been a project that's kind of been like overall fun. There's a few people in the team, Alex Fewings and Patrick, who are probably saying it's not fun, it's really stressful, but I think overall we've found it really, because there is that technical thing, like we've had to upgrade the engine of the game post-launch to support this feature and swap to the Vulkan render and stuff. So it's been a real technical challenge, but it's starting to kind of come to the bit where it's looking fun now. Like it's starting to actually be fun.
Is there a specific like timeline for that feature or that release or anything, or is it sort of like as it's ready basically?
This year, probably Q4. So we're and the fun thing is it kind of supports all the Quest headsets. So on the Quest 2, I feel like it's still a fun experience. It is a bit more, I'd say, dangerous, because you are closed off. So like you're saying with the iPhone, you can't even, when you have the Quest 2 on, you can't see the world around you other than the black and white pass-through. And the color virtual reality objects are compelling compared to the black and white. So you sort of, there's a risk that you can be a bit distracted, I guess.
Interesting. So that totally makes sense. Yeah.
At that.
But obviously that's also sort of like so future-proof. Just for, as we're recording this, I know Quest 3 has been announced and it's going to have all of that, pass-through MR and everything. Probably the Apple will be announced by the time this airs, so I probably shouldn't say too much, because more than likely I'll just be wrong making my predictions on what that's going to be. So yeah, I'm also kind of curious to pick your brain a little bit on this multiplayer, especially for your game. Sort of like because that changes quite a bit, and I haven't actually played Espire 1, but did that one have multiplayer as well?
No, it didn't. So yeah, it was our first multiplayer game.
Okay. And how did that sort of like, from a design standpoint, going from stealth to something like that, like what was the sort of like, from a design standpoint, how did that sort of evolve?
I guess it was difficult. Being our first multiplayer game, we were kind of just learning the core of trying to make a multiplayer experience at the same time with Espire 2. And I guess the biggest challenges were, I'd say in a post sort of mortem reflection, we focused too much on the technical side of it. And so we had the challenge of trying to do the different heights co-op and eking out like a experience where the players are encouraged to work together. With the stealth, it was always a challenge too, where the we had the one player that might give away their position and ruin the perfect stealth run. So trying to hope that was going to be a fun experience too. And also, there's some players that just want to take the action approach. So we did work to try and cater to a stealth action thing. We added like a badge system and star ratings, so that if you're playing with your friend and you wanted to really try hardcore stealth, you could be going for 5 stars, 5 badges, and then progressively, if certain things go wrong, if you let combat kind of enter the fray, or if you kill an enemy instead of sort of incapacitating him by knocking him out, you'll slowly lose badges. So hopefully with 2 friends, you could kind of go, let's try and go for the alternate stealth run, and if we mess it up, doesn't matter. Let's now go for, a 5-star run still, even though we lost a couple badges. Or you could kind of go, let's go for the quickest run we can, and to hell with it with all the stealth. Let's just go full action. So yeah, there was a hope that it could cater to a few play styles.
Yeah, I mean, co-op VR is still one. I'm surprised at how few co-op VR games there are out there, but there's something really fun about that. And like anything that gets you sort of like talking with your friends or whoever you're playing with, just to like, it really sort of like, the social aspect of it is, I'm constantly surprised at how much that adds to the experience. So yeah. Well, Mike, thank you so much for joining us today. Anything else that you want to mention or plug or talk about?
I guess I just mentioned, firstly, thanks for having me on. It's been really cool. Got to meet you in person at the GDC conference this year. As a company, I want to mention, we've had to do a downsize this year. So there's a few people in our team that are absolute superstars that we've had to let go. And hoping that they find awesome work. And we're still continuing as a company, despite obviously having to do that. We're excited to share more about our Espire MR mode and Espire 2 this year.
Awesome. Well, check out MR mode coming later this year, and we'll see everybody next time. Thanks for joining.